100 people. So, I think a lot of people don't realize that these big titles make multiples the amount of big movies and have multiple the amounts of staff.
Amir, do you have any advice for game developers that have lost their jobs recently?
Absolutely. I mean, most of all, I would say talk to people and make connections. People, understandably, are so fast to reach out to others and say, can you help me get a role? That can often feel transactional, especially when they're already getting so many notes. Data I have suggests you're 10 times more likely to get a job if you have any connection to someone on the recruiting or hiring team. Reaching out and just saying, can I talk to you? You have to allow yourself 5 to 6 months, even in normal times, I think, to get a job in this industry because it's so competitive. So don't be transactional, build relationships, and take your time.
That's Amir Satvat. He publishes resources for video game job hunters. This is Morning Edition from NPR News. I'm A. Martinez.
And I'm Layla Fadel.
The Marketplace Morning Report is coming up next, and then in 10 minutes at 9 o'clock, it's the BBC NewsHour. Let's check in with London to see what they're working on. Good morning, BBC.
Good morning, WNYC. I'm Tim Franks. On today's NewsHour, is Joe Biden changing his line on the Gaza war? And we'll hear from a son of a released hostage. That's BBC NewsHour, coming up at 9 on WNYC.
Lots of issues on the subways this morning. 5 and 6 services disrupted in both directions because of a signal problem at 14th Street, Union Square. The MTA says consider using 2, 3, N, Q, R, or W trains instead. The MTA says they're running as much southbound A service as they can with the crew they have available, but expect delays there as well. It's 27 degrees, expecting mostly sunny skies today, a high of 37. Tomorrow, sunny, a little warmer, high of 47 degrees. This is WNYC, it's 8:51.
WNYC supporters include Netflix presenting Maestro. Bradley Cooper directs and stars as conductor-composer Leonard Bernstein, and the love story chronicling his lifelong relationship with actress wife Felicia, played by Carey Mulligan, now playing in select theaters and on Netflix December 20th.
I'm Sean Carlson, host of All Things Considered on WNYC. Every day, WNYC delivers unbiased reporting and conversations that strengthen our community. We're always here for you, bringing you the latest news and helping to make sense of what it all means. But we can only do it with the support of our listeners. You count on us, and we count on you. Please make a contribution now. Visit WNYC.org/donate or call 888-376-WNYC.
The right to a trial by jury is in the Constitution, but when does it not apply?
Marketplace Morning Report is supported by Affinity, provider of the CRM for the private capital relationship economy. Affinity knows who has the best relationship with the right startup. Affinity.co/marketplace.
From Marketplace, I'm Sabri Ben-Achour, in for David Brancaccio. If you are charged with a major crime, you have the right to a jury trial. But does that apply if you're charged with breaking regulations and federal agency rules? You still have that right to a jury. The Securities and Exchange Commission says no. A legal challenge says yes. And that is behind the case going before the Supreme Court today. Nova Safo has more.
The Supreme Court is set to hear an appeal of a decade-old case in which an administrative law judge sided with the Securities and Exchange Commission and found hedge fund manager George Jarkozy had essentially lied to his clients. He was barred from the securities industry. Jarkozy challenged the decision for, among other things, violating his right to a jury trial. Conservative and business groups are backing the challenge, and last year the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled in Jarkozy's favor. There are some 3,000 administrative law judges working at various regulatory agencies, including at the Social Security Administration, the Environmental Protection Agency, and the National Labor Relations Board. A 1946 law gave these judges the power to adjudicate litigation brought by regulators against those they oversee. In 2010, under the Dodd-Frank Act, Congress expanded the SEC's powers to use administrative law judges. It could now ask those judges to decide cases against hedge fund managers, among others. Critics say the appeals court's decision against the SEC, if upheld, would make it difficult for the agency and potentially other regulators to conduct their oversight function, as more cases flood the federal court system and grind it to a halt. I'm Nova Safo for Marketplace.
Out of all the major metro areas in the U.S., there was one where home prices surged more in the last year than anywhere else. That would be Detroit. Home prices there were up 6.7% in September from a year ago. That is according to the S&P CoreLogic Case-Shiller Metro Index out this week. It beat out New York, San Diego, and Los Angeles. So what is going on in Motor City? Marketplace's Stephanie Hughes has that.
The last decade was pretty good for Detroit. Brookings Metro Senior Fellow Jenny Schutt says some neighborhoods saw lots of investment.
Once you get core neighborhoods where people want to live, that tends to drive investment in surrounding neighborhoods as well.
Schutz also notes that Detroit home prices hadn't boomed in recent years the way they had in some other cities, so there's more room for upward growth. And she says when housing prices rise, people tend to take better care of their homes.
When your property is appreciating, then people have more equity, and they're also more likely to do things like rehab their kitchens or, invest in some new landscaping.
That can create a kind of virtuous cycle. But Anthony Baber of the nonprofit Detroit Action worries some residents of the city will be left out.
Detroit is extremely working class. It's majority communities of color, and rising housing prices are consistently pushing your neighbors out. And so you end up with a city that's whitewashed and doesn't have the culture that's been established over a long time.
To minimize that, Brookings' Jenny Schutt says now's the time for the local government to buy property and invest in affordable housing before it becomes not affordable anymore. I'm Stephanie Hughes for Marketplace.
All right, let's do the numbers. Dow, S&P, and NASDAQ futures are all up in the 3 to 0.6% range, with Dow futures up 118 points. The yield on the 10-year Treasury is 4.311%.
Marketplace Morning Report is supported by Palo Alto Networks. Palo Alto Networks delivers comprehensive cybersecurity protection while automating cyber defense to stop threats so organizations can thrive. Learn more at paloaltonetworks.com. And by How We Survive. Climate change is dire, but it does not have to be world-ending. Tune in to the new season of How We Survive from Marketplace.
Tomorrow will mark 1 year since ChatGPT was released to the public. So far, 3.8% of businesses say they now use AI to produce goods and services. It's higher for IT businesses, 13.8%. And that nagging fear that we're going to get replaced by bots has not gone away. Marketplace's Megan McCarty-Carino has more on what has actually changed in the world of work in the past year and how it bodes for the future.
Alessandro Perilli has been tracking all the companies that have publicly acknowledged using generative artificial intelligence in operations. He's the CEO of an R&D company focused on AI.
And we definitely have seen a massive adoption for a lot of different use cases.
He says his list is now 120 long. It includes financial institutions like JP Morgan, which uses AI to analyze statements by the Federal Reserve, and education companies like the Khan Academy, which is using AI-generated lesson plans. And it turns out, in some cases, humans and AI work well together.
This is a real game changer.
Eric Brynjolfsson at Stanford's Digital Economy Lab is a co-author of a working paper that looks at how human customer service agents used chatbot suggestions to make them better at their jobs.
There was higher customer satisfaction. The agents working with it were less likely to quit.
He says it's an example of how the tool can make human workers more productive rather than replacing them entirely. And that's a common theme, says Shaked Noy, a PhD student in economics at MIT, who studied white-collar workers using a chatbot for writing tasks.
Emails, writing short marketing press releases, short reports, things like that.
Noy says AI could bring benefits to organizations and workers, but it's too early to say how a productivity bump will play out.
Some people might lose their jobs, new jobs might be created, the nature of existing jobs might change.
It will take time for businesses to deploy the technology at a wide scale, says Anton Koronek, an economics professor at the University of Virginia.
There is a really big implementation gap between how many things generative AI can already do productively and how few things it's actually used for.
He says the best thing workers can do is try the tech out for themselves.
frankly, it kind of felt like people had to go through the 5 stages of grief before using generative AI productively. So first, there was a lot of denial.
Ultimately, he says, we've got to reach the stage of acceptance that this is the world we're living in. I'm Megan McCarty-Carino for Marketplace.
And in New York, I'm Sabri Ben-Achour with the Marketplace Morning Report. From APM, American Public Media.